at the end of 8 years in the seminary, the very last thing we were told before we got on the plane to head off to Africa was, don't forget every Sunday to take your daraprim. Daraprim was a prophylactic against malaria, which allegedly keeps malaria at bay. It doesn't, but that was the idea, that it was supposed to. And so every Sunday for the first year that I was in Kenya, faithfully I took daraprim every Sunday morning. And every Sunday, for the entire Sunday, I was dizzy. Because one of the side effects of daraprim is you're really, really dizzy. So I spent every single Sunday dizzy from the time I got up in the morning and took my daraprim until I went to bed at night. And as you can imagine, Sunday was a very big day. Typically on a Sunday morning, I'd say Mass early in the main mission, and Mass was like a 3-hour performance, and then drive about an hour to an outstation and repeat the process for another 3 hours, and then drive another hour to a third outstation and repeat it, and then get back home at night about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, dizzy the whole day long. And so I was only 6 months there, and I got malaria anyway. I got malaria. I went there in November 1972, and I had my first real attack of malaria in April of 1973. So I kept taking the daraprim every Sunday, and I'd be dizzy every Sunday, and I kept getting malaria anyway. Maybe it was less intense, but I got it anyway. So finally, after about a year, I figured there's no point in taking daraprim. Now, I can trade off. I can either be dizzy 52 days every year and also get malaria, or I can stop taking it and I won't be dizzy, but I'll get malaria maybe 3 or 4 times a year. So it was a trade-off, 52 days of dizziness versus maybe 30 days of malaria. So I opted for the 30 days of malaria. And so I got malaria on average about twice every year. And occasionally, if I would get it really badly, I would treat myself with quinine. Quinine is a real heavy-duty drug to try to counteract malaria once you got it. And so occasionally, I take quinine. So this went on from 1972 until 1983. And in 1983, in October of 1983, I got what I considered a really, really, really bad dose of malaria. And at that stage, I was in a very remote mission, a place called Kipsaraman. My nearest missionary neighbor was maybe 4 hours drive away. So I thought I had malaria, and I was treating myself with quinine for malaria. But 10 days into it, I realized something was really radically wrong. Now, I didn't have a phone. There was no phone lines there. So I'm lying in bed, and about 2 weeks into it, I figured, this is it. I'm dying. And I had this really, really, really bad fever. My entire body literally was shaking with the fever. And I was totally convinced, this is it. I'm dying. I'm 4,000 miles from home. I'm 4 hours away from the nearest missionary. Somebody's going to find me in a month's time, rotting. And all of a sudden, I hear a voice inside, deep, deep inside me. I can't say it was inside my head, but it was the clearest voice I've ever heard in my life. And the voice said to me, your body is doing what bodies are built to do, but you're not your body. And then it said to me, your emotions are doing precisely what emotions are built to do, but you're not your emotions. And then it said, and your intellect is doing what an intelligence is designed to do, but you're not your intelligence. And I felt this extraordinary serenity just descend upon me. My body continued to shiver, and my emotions were all over the place, and my mind was doing all these crazy things. But there was a knowing at the core of my being that I wasn't my body, and I wasn't my emotions, and I wasn't my intellect. I wasn't any of these things, that I was an internal being, and I could just witness. There was a part of me just witnessing what the body was doing, what the emotions were doing, what the intellect was doing, but totally detached from the whole thing. And from that moment on, I have never had a fear of death since then. That was the first of 3 very close brushes with death. So I want to use that as a jumping off point for what I want to say today. And I'm going to make 3 main points this morning. I'm going to talk about the difference between intersection and incarnation. And then I'm going to talk about the Our Father and the crucifixion. And then thirdly, I'm going to talk about Holy Week as a hologram. So those are the 3 points I'll make this morning. So the first one is intersection versus incarnation. So there's a second part to the story that I just told you, and the second part is this. A few days after that experience, somebody happened upon me. Somebody came visiting, found where I was, took me out there, and brought me up to a mission hospital in a place called Eldama Ravine. And I found out that I didn't have malaria. I had typhoid. And so I'm in hospital for 3 weeks, and then I got airlifted from that mission hospital back to Ireland, and I spent the next 3 months in Ireland recuperating from typhoid. Now, what came to me during that period was this. There was a big difference between my resources and the resources of the people that I worked for. I had dedicated my life to it. I loved these people, but I had resources they didn't have. So when I got typhoid, the resources were put in place to airlift me out of it to a place where I could be properly taken care of. When the people I worked for got typhoid, they died because they didn't have the resources. Nobody was available to give them an airplane ticket to take them to England or Ireland or any place else for treatment. And so they got typhoid and they died. And that for me is the difference between the Jesus figure and some of the other avatars. Avatars are manifestations of God that appear in human form. But there are two kinds of avatars, it seems to me. There are the avatars who intersect temporarily with human nature, and there are the avatars who sign up for incarnation as human beings. And an example of the first one would be perhaps Krishna. Within the Hindu tradition, there's this great entity. In fact, Rudolf Steiner has a teaching that the entity that incarnated as Krishna, 500 years before Jesus Christ, he didn't fully incarnate. He adumbrated Arjuna. He overlit Arjuna is the phrase that Steiner uses. So it's as if the spirit or the essence of Krishna came down upon this human being called Arjuna. But it wasn't that Krishna actually incarnated. But he intersected with human history very, very significantly, according to the Hindu scriptures. But that's very, very different from what he did when he came back as Jesus of Nazareth. With Jesus of Nazareth, we don't have an intersection between a divine figure and the human condition. We have a full incarnation of the divinity in human form. And so Jesus is an avatar who fully experienced, literally from conception to death, the full range of what it meant to be a human person. He knew what it was like to be carried in a womb for 9 months. He knew what it was like to be shoved through the birth canal. He knew what it was like to suckle on his mother's breast. He knew what it was like to be angry. He knew what it was like to be afraid. He knew what it was like to feel lust. He knew what it was like to feel fear. He had all these experiences right through his entire lifetime up to his death. And only once in his entire life, and we heard it read this morning, was he tempted to ask to be airlifted out. At the very, very, very end, 24 hours to go, and he realizes this time tomorrow I'm going to be a pierced, dead corpse. And he says to the Father, if there's any other way of doing this except what I've signed up for, please let me off the hook. Let us rewrite the contract. But immediately he catches and says, no, cancel the airfare. I don't want to be airlifted out. I want to go through this because everybody else has to go through this thing. There's no airlifting other people out. Everybody faces death. And so in today's passage we hear, only for that one moment did he think, maybe I can rewrite the contract. Maybe I can appeal for an air ticket to get me back to Ireland because I'm not enjoying this process of typhoid. But he figured, no, I'm going through, I will continue it. And so he totally experiences every facet of the human condition all the way through onto the cross itself. And when I come to the second point, I want to point out that these famous 7 last words of Jesus, they're not just scriptural quotations that he's tossing off in order to fulfill the Old Testament. He is really, really, really having every one of these experiences. And as he has the experiences, he articulates what it is like to be in the grip of that particular emotion. So the big difference between the entity that comes as Krishna and the entity that comes as Jesus of Nazareth is that one is merely intersecting with the human condition and making a difference. It's a significant intersection. But as Jesus, there's the full incarnation as a human being with the decision never to appeal to be airlifted out of the situation when the going gets really, really tough. And that's the extraordinary exemplar that he is. It's very hard to use Krishna as an exemplar because Krishna never fully participated in the human condition. He didn't know what it was like to have particular kinds of human emotions or to go through death. But Jesus participated 100% in the human experience, all the way from conception to breathing his last. That's the first point I want to make. Second point I call the Your Father and the crucifixion. After 65 years of praying the Our Father in many different languages, and 65 years of going through Holy Week again and again and again, and thinking about the crucifixion, this morning for the first time in my life, in my meditation, I suddenly realized that the Our Father and the crucifixion are the same thing. One is the form of the prayer for life, and the other is the form of the prayer for death. So let me lead you through it. Allegedly, there are 7 last words of Jesus in the scriptures as he's hanging on the cross. And there are 7 statements in the Our Father. And when you begin to look at them, they're almost identical. So the Our Father starts off with saying, Our Father who art in heaven. And the 7 injunctions are, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. So there's these 7 statements in the Our Father. And when you look at them, you package them, there's a few different groupings. It starts with source, Our Father who art in heaven. Now in actual fact, Jesus would have been speaking in Aramaic. And the phrase that's translated into English as Our Father is much more accurately translated as birthing principle of the universe. It is not gender specific. It is not about a daddy. It is the birthing principle of the universe. And when Jesus taught this prayer in Aramaic to his disciples, he would have been talking not about a father with a beard sitting in heaven on a throne, but of literally the birthing principle of the universe itself, that which calls the universe into being. And so the first phrase of the Our Father who art in heaven, he's talking about literally that from which everything emanates, that which is the source of all that is. So the very first statement of the Our Father is the connection to the source of all that is. So he starts off with the connection to source. And then he talks about the mission. The next phase of it is the mission. Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. Thy will be done. So the next phase of the Our Father is about grounding source in the incarnation of our planet. The mission of creating on planet Earth that which pertains at source itself. The same will, the same kind of a kingdom, the same way of interrelating. So the second stage of the Our Father, and there's 2 phrases involved in it, has to do with the mission of the universe itself. The mission of the universe is to create heaven on earth. In fact, to create heaven on all the earths, in all the universes, in all the dimensions. So we go from source to mission. The third section of it has to do with our relationship with others. Give everybody their needs. Give us this day our daily bread. We're not just talking about panis. We're talking about everything it needs to have a human experience, an incarnational experience. Give us the resources we need in order to have this kind of experience. And give us the ability to forgive other people in the same way that you forgive us. So the third stage has to do with our relationships with others. So we start off with source. Then there's the agenda of God, or the will of God, or the mission on planet Earth. And then there's the relationships that involve with other people. And then it ends with the self. Do not lead us into temptation, but deliver us from evil. I'm now talking about in my own incarnational experience as I pray this prayer. And it's not that we're asking God so much to lead us out of temptation, or to lead us around temptation, or to airlift us away from temptation, but to give us the courage to walk through the temptation, which is exactly what he did on the cross himself. He walked through the temptations of every stage of the journey. He did not ask to be airlifted out. He didn't ask for a shortcut or an end run around it. He did not say to take us out of temptation, but lead us through temptation to the other side. So we've gone from source to mission to others to self. So that's the movement of the Our Father. Now when you look at what happens on the cross, it's exactly the same prayer, except it goes in the opposite direction. It starts with the self, and then it goes into others, and then mission, and then it ends with source. So in actual fact, the 7 words that Jesus speaks on the cross, as far as I'm concerned, is the Our Father in reverse. It's the very, very same prayer. One is the dying version of the prayer, and the other is the living version of the prayer. We've been taught the living version, and we haven't recognized what the dying version is. Now, the different evangelists they ascribe different words to Jesus. So we heard Mark's account this morning. Mark ascribes only a single statement to Jesus. Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me? Luke has 3 statements, and John has 3 statements. Matthew is kind of redundant. Matthew doesn't have any statements which aren't contained in the other 3 gospel writers. So very often, the list is reduced to 3 gospel writers: Mark, Luke, and John. So Mark focuses on the self. The agony Jesus is experiencing as he feels he's abandoned. It's a real emotion he's having. And that's what Mark reports. Luke reports Jesus extending himself to others. He's concerned about the thief who's dying with him. And he's concerned about the soldiers who are making fun of him. He's forgiving them. And finally, he's concerned about source. He commends his spirit back into the hands of source. He unifies. He dissolves his separate identity and he unifies with source again. So Luke is concerned about spreading it to others, relating to others, and going back to source. John is concerned with three things. In his account, he's concerned with the self, where Jesus says, I'm thirsty. He's concerned about his family, where he says, son, behold your mother, mother, behold your son. And he's concerned with his mission. The last thing he says, according to John, is, it is completed. I've done it. I've checked off all the boxes. I've done what you'd asked me to do. So if I were to walk through the 7 pieces, here's what the prayer on the cross would look like. It would start with the self, then it would move towards others, then it would look at mission, and then finally it would end with source, which is exactly the reverse of what the Our Father does. So he starts with his own preoccupation with himself at some stage. He's on the cross. He's thirsty, really, really thirsty. He's gasping for thirst. He says, I'm thirsty. So he's aware of his own suffering. And he's aware of his own psychological suffering, not just physical thirst. And he feels like he's been abandoned by God. And he cries out, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, my God, why have you abandoned me? And so it's not that Jesus is quoting scripture. He's not just tossing off these lines because they're contained someplace in the Hebrew scriptures. He's saying these things because that's the experience he's having. That is the experience of what it is to be dying on a cross. He's feeling this psychologically, and he's feeling this physiologically, and he's verbalizing what he's feeling. This is the true mystic. The mystic is the person who is so in the experience, they don't have to make up a story, they say what the reality is at every moment of the experience. And the reality was, he was really, really thirsty, and the reality was, he felt totally psychologically abandoned. And so that's where it starts off. He starts with himself. And then he manages to survive that phase of the crucifixion, and now he begins to see that there are other people suffering as well. And the first thing he sees suffering, he starts with his family. And he goes from family to neighbors to enemies. So now he's looking down and he sees his beloved disciple John, and he sees Mary, his mother, and he realizes the extraordinary pain. He's watching their faces looking up at him. And he can see the pain. And he's just imagining what it's going to be like for them tomorrow and next week and a month's time and the anniversary, or the yahrzeit, the anniversary. What's it going to be like for them? And unable to point, he has to point with his head and says, son, behold your mother. Mother, behold your son. Look after each other. I'm not going to be here to do it anymore. Please look out for each other. So now his concern has gone beyond his own personal pain, and he's reaching out to the pain of those who are dearest and nearest to him, his mother and his beloved disciple. And then a little bit further, he's aware that there are 2 other people being crucified with him, and they're in agony, and one of them is berating him and taunting him, and the other guy is recognizing that there's something different about Jesus. And this other guy says to him, remember me when you come into your kingdom. He's recognized that this man is different. There's something very different with this man. He's not somebody who's screaming in agony and screaming abuse at his persecutors. He's somebody he's radiating love. So he turns to him and says, please remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus turns and says to him, I guarantee you, today you will be with me in paradise. And so he's gone beyond the stage of just identifying with the self and identifying with his own personal suffering. And he now can feel the suffering of his mother, his friends, and his fellow, the one who's been crucified with him. It'll go to another stage. He can look down at the people who are taunting him and the people who are making fun of him, the soldiers and the high priests who are saying, if you are the Son of God, come down and show us. And he can feel love even for these. He understands that maybe they're suffering more than anybody else because they're suffering from the darkness of their ignorance. And he has love for those, and he can say to them, Father, forgive them. They have no idea what they're doing. If they had any idea what they were doing, they wouldn't be doing it. So he can extend his love to others, even to the enemy, even in the middle of his crisis, the greatest crisis of his life. He can extend himself. He's gone way beyond his own personal suffering. He's gone beyond the suffering of his immediate family, whom he loves. He's gone beyond this fellow criminal being crucified beside him. He can extend the love now, even to those who are responsible for his agonizing death. So that's the second phase of it, from the self to the other. The third phase is captured in his adherence to his mission. And this we'll find in Luke, in John's Gospel. In John's Gospel, we are told that Jesus says, "It is completed." So the mission I came, the thing I volunteered to do 33 years ago, before I was conceived, to come down, to try to create Christ consciousness in this world, to move the stuck wheels of human history, to move it on. I've given it my best shot. I didn't ask to be airlifted out. I came nearer once, but I resisted the temptation. I've checked all the boxes. I've done what you've asked me to do. I've done what I volunteered to do. It is complete. And so now the mission is done. And the fourth stage of it, it is now about source. And Luke will capture this. Luke will say finally, Jesus say, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." Because now there's just total merging. There's not God and Jesus anymore. There's only God. There is only source. Jesus now has dissolved. The entity that was Jesus has dissolved into the universality of the source, the oneness of source. So there's the four stages, beginning with the self, extending to others, going into the completion of the mission, and finally winding up in source. So there you have the Our Father in reverse. The Our Father starts with source and ends up with self. The crucifixion starts with self and it ends with source. So it's like the two bookends. The entire thing is completed. Which brings me to my third point. Holy Week as a hologram. A hologram is a notion whereby the totality of anything is contained in any part of itself. And in physics, it's got literally by splitting a beam of light and reuniting the beams. So that instead of just a normal photograph is a one-to-one mapping between the subject and the image. So if I take a photograph of George here, and I show you the photograph of George, there's a one-to-one mapping between George's left eye and the left eye in the image, George's nose and the nose in the image, George's left shoulder and the left shoulder in the image. There's a one-to-one mapping between a normal photograph, between the image and the subject. In a hologram, there's a one-to-every-place mapping. So George's right shoulder is contained in every part of the photograph. So no matter how little a piece you have, you contain the whole thing. So a hologram means that every part contains the totality. Fractals are a little like that. Fractals are mathematical formulations which create graphs or configurations which repeat the very, very same, infinitely at greater and lesser scales. So it's the same kind of configuration at greater and lesser scales. Now for me, Holy Week is a hologram of at many different levels. So Holy Week for me is a hologram of the very universe in which we find ourselves. So from Palm Sunday, which is today, over the course of the next week, we're going to go through a roller coaster of emotions and extraordinary rituals. Starting with the notion that today the crowds lined the roads for Jesus and they cheered him and they called him Hosanna to the Son of David, and they believed that he was the Messiah. Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, we're going to be watching a witch hunt where the authorities set out to capture him and to kill him. On Thursday, we're going to witness the great glory of Eucharist and the betrayal by Judas. On Friday, we're going to witness the crucifixion and the agonizing death. And Saturday, there's this kind of no man's land where Christ has descended to the underworld and there's this terrible desolation. What it's like for his family now that he's gone. And then Sunday, there's the resurrection. So in one 8-day period, there's this roller coaster of ritual that brings us all the way from the glory of Palm Sunday to the desolation of Friday and Saturday to the resurrection of Sunday. Now for me, that is actually a hologram at many different levels. It's a hologram of the very universe in which we find ourselves, which itself is a hologram of the metaverse. According to quantum mechanical theory, there are 10 to the power of 27 brand new universes called into being every second for every cubic centimeter of 11-dimensional mathematical space. So this one universe in which we find ourselves is literally just a little hologram of all the quantum mechanical possibilities for universes. And so the universe itself is a hologram of a metaverse. Our planet, it seems to me, is a hologram of this universe. The universe came into being from source, and it has a mission. And the mission involves relating to others, and the one that's relating to others is the notion of a personal self, which is Christ conscious. So we get the very same four stages that you find in the Our Father and you find in the crucifixion scene. You start with source, and then there's mission, and then there's relationship, and then there's the self, which is at the core of my experience of the entire universe. The bloody planet itself is a hologram of what this universe has been attempting to do for 13.7 billion years. And there are parts of this universe which have completed the journey, which have understood what source is, which have fulfilled their mission, which have learned how to be in relationship, and who hold themselves now in a Christ consciousness. I am totally convinced that there are dimensions and worlds and galaxies and entities who have run the entire gamut of Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday and have resurrected to Christ consciousness. Our little planet is the latest in this journey. So there's a statement, for instance, in physiology and anatomy, evolutionary anatomy, that ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. In other words, the journey of the individual reenacts the journey of the tribe. Phylogeny just means the journey of the tribe. And so the journey that took us as human beings 3.7 billion years to go from single-celled creatures to Homo sapiens sapiens, each individual reenacts that in utero. We go from single-celled creatures in our mother's wombs to little fish, to reptiles that are crawling on the ground, to Homo erectus about the age of 10 months, to Homo sapiens about the age of 2 years, to Homo sapiens sapiens at the age of about 7 years. We reenact that as individuals. But if ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, I'm convinced that phylogeny recapitulates cosmogeny. So that the history of the tribe, of the species itself, is a reenactment of the history of the universe itself. That where the planet is going, the universe has already done it in many, many different parts of itself already. And our job as a planetary community is to continue until we break through into Christ consciousness. And then the individual is a hologram of what the planet is attempting to do. So for me, the Holy Week ceremonies are the kind of the hologram, the 1 week, the 8-day hologram of this cosmic mystery, literally a cosmic mystery. Of a planetary mystery which is global in its extent to the individual mission of growing into Christ consciousness. And so the invitation I extend to myself and to you for this week is this: to utilize this week to go all the way through the Our Father, from source to mission to other to self, and to go all the ways through crucifixion, from self to other to mission to source, so that by the end of the week we have really understood what this little universe of ours has been attempting to do.